So I'm going to tear a hole in the screen with this. I'm Chris McDonough. I work at CCP, and I am the senior producer for World of Darkness, which is the game that we're developing in Atlanta. I come here frequently to work on Eve, and actually our team is doing some work on Eve as well. So I just found out about this presentation like 2 days ago, so don't expect anything great. I was drunk this morning and I put these slides together. And so yeah, I have been working in the game industry for 20 years. I was one of the original designers on Vampire the Masquerade, which is a tabletop role-playing game for old school nerds. And I've been doing game design for 20 years. I've done some board games, I've worked on card games, I've done tabletop role-playing games, and also worked on PC games and some console games as well. So this is one of those slides where like, why do you prototype? Oh Jesus, if I didn't think I needed a prototype, I wouldn't be sitting in this meeting. But there are a few things to think about there on that people don't often do. And I'll tell you this, actually, we don't do it enough at CCP. We do not do enough prototyping. It's something that's really easy to forget when you get caught up in the thing you want to make, as opposed to figuring out what's the best thing to make. So they save time because you know, obviously once you know more directly what you want to make, and there's less thrashing while you're trying to work on code. They save money because for the same reason. But these two are actually the ones that are more important to me. They unify the vision and they cut out a lot of bullshit. So we have endless debates in game design meetings about what's going to be good and what's not going to be good. And, oh, I don't think so, or whatever. And the second you put one of these prototypes down in front of people and they can actually play it, all of a sudden the whole tone changes. It stops being, what do I think is going to be good, and it starts being, what's going to make this better? And that's actually the biggest thing that I think that we get out of prototyping when we do it. This is a prototype that we ran, let me turn it up, in our office yesterday for something that we're working on. You probably can't hear that, but this is at the Atlanta office. I asked them to send me this video because I knew they were running this prototype yesterday, and it's for some exploratory gameplay stuff that we're doing. I can't tell you about it, but what you see here though is we're just using the same old crappy chips and poker chips and printed out pieces of paper and whatever. It's really, even at a big company, it's all done the same way. Just, hey, let's sit down and try this out and see what's fun. We run it multiple times to get feedback from different people within the company, and it's usually just there to simulate other stuff that we're trying to achieve with the game, and yeah, that's obviously what a prototype is. So there's a ton of traditional tools that you can use for prototyping. We have not used all of these, but the ones that I can tell you that in our office that we've used a bunch is, well, of course we have Unreal license because that's what Dust in China is being done on, Dust 514, and we've used a bunch of Game Maker. There it is. We use a bunch of Game Maker. It's a super simple, free program to download. I think actually it might be $19 now, that anybody can use. You could hand it to a game designer and they can put together prototypes with it. That one's really good to use. Minecraft, weirdly enough, is a good one for prototyping at this point. We haven't used it, but we play it a lot, so I thought I'd put it up there. And, of course, just board game prototypes, and all that sort of stuff. But there's a ton of options out there. Oh, and Flash is another really good one if you're familiar with Flash. Anyway, I'm sure you guys know about this. So basically, we do two kinds of prototyping. There's one that's to prove an existing idea, and one that's to generate ideas. And today I'm kind of going to focus more on the generating ideas thing because I think that's maybe the stage you guys are more at right now. We often do it because we've written up a long game design, and before we want to hand it to programmers and say, hey, you got to make this, we need to have that unity of vision. They need to know exactly what they're doing, and the prototype really helps with that. But it also can be, like I said, just to generate ideas as well. Again, a lot of these slides are super like, hey, I know I should do this, but it's true. I always forget to use the internet. I will start talking about some bullshit that I'm wondering, oh, we should do this, and I I go into the app store, and it turns out out of their 450,000 iPhone apps, somebody already made one. It's 99 cents, and I download it and go, hey look, this is what we want to do. And it's amazing how easy it is to forget about those easy resources. Researching other games, go onto YouTube and type in the words game prototype. There's going to be a bunch of seeing how other people do it. And it's really easy to forget. And let's see. So one of the first things to know when you're doing this is that speed is really the essential thing that you want out of prototyping, especially when you're using it to generate ideas. If you spend a week or 2 weeks trying to come up with something, it's almost too long, because it doesn't you get committed to your ideas really, really fast, and then you stop wanting to change them and iterate on them. What you really want to do is fail a bunch of times really fast, and I'm sure you've heard that, fail often, fail frequently. I forget now, I forgot the phrase. Fail. Fail frequently, iterate often. I can't remember. Anyway, but it removes the fear of failure. Failing actually removes your fear of failing. So like once you fail once, you're like, I guess I'll try it again. And after you do that 5 or 6 times, you stop being afraid to try new things and stop being committed to the ideas that you have. And that's something that's really important to get over. Designs by multiple different designers. Again, when you're looking at speed, it often is that prototype that I just showed you guys the video from in our office. That actually, there are 3 different designers doing that same prototype. So what we do is we say, here's the basic idea of what we want. Now we want you guys to go make a prototype, and the 3 of you don't work together to make the same prototype. Each one of you go make 3 different prototypes, and so that's what's actually happening. That was only one of the ones that you saw. And stealing ideas from team members. So frequently what happens is we come back and we look at the prototypes that have been done and say, I really like this part of that prototype and I'm going to take it. We really try to get away from teams wanting to own their ideas in terms of, that's my idea and we just share it freely and everybody gets credit for it, and that's just kind of the way it needs to be. And so stealing ideas from somebody else to include in your own is just a part of the process at that point. So here's another method of prototyping that people often don't think to do, but is actually one of the most valuable prototype methods that we have in the company. And it's not technically a prototype because it's not playable, but what you basically do is you sit down and you imagine the user's experience and you actually write it through in as detailed a method as you can. So frequently when we're doing game design, we tend to gloss over a lot of the details and say, like interface or usability details that are actually a big part of what makes a game fun. And so we'll often just talk about a game design in very general terms and then start to design systems without really thinking about how it works. And with these walkthroughs, what we do is we basically start at the basic beginning point, which is, okay, a person picks up their iPhone and they turn it on, they open the game. What's the first thing they see? Is it our load screen? Is it some kind of settings menu? Are they seeing a tutorial before they can even go into the game? And it changes the way that people start to think about the game. And we do that from start to finish. It also helps in alignment on the project when we're working on it. So once we've got that, we sit down in a room with all the designers, and in our case, because we're a large company, we have a lot of people, a lot of you guys are, I'm sure, on small teams, and so it's easier to keep alignment. But within a big company like ours, I have 10 managers, and I bring them all in and I say, we're going to read through this line by line, and every person is going to know exactly what we're doing. It's not like vagaries of, I think I know what that design is like. We're going to read through this, and by the way, every person in the room has a portion of the design that is their responsibility. When we get to that part, and I read it out loud, I'm going to ask these questions, I'm going to read this, and you're going to tell me if it's changed or if it's wrong at this point. And so it's great for getting everyone on the same page in terms of explaining what the game is, and it also is great for long-term maintenance of making sure everyone stays on the same page when things change during the process. And it's super easy to do. Board games. You guys just saw the board game prototypes that we were doing. We bust open, we have a bunch of board games in the office that are just, they're no longer whole games that can be played. They're just pieces, parts in a box that, you can pull out counters or poker chips or, cards or anything that you want, and little markers for moving around. And it's amazing. There's almost nothing that you can't do in the long run with kind of, at least in a starting idea sense, with just scissor, paper, and markers, color pieces of paper red or green or blue to indicate buttons you want on screen, all that. It's really easy and really fast. Faking it. This is one that we also don't do enough, but is another one of the super easiest ways to prototype. So we have a system in World of Darkness for taking over locations where I guess who don't know about World of Darkness, it's a game about vampires and it's CCP's next big MMO. And basically there's a system for taking over parts of the world. In that, it involves players going to certain locations for a certain amount of time and doing things when they're there. And one of the things that's really easy to do is literally just to open up any 3D game with a world space in it and walk there and say, okay, in our game you're going to walk to a location, okay, and you're going to have to make this skill check to do a certain thing, okay. So open up your 3D window, walk to a place on the map that we've indicated, roll dice. Was it successful? Great. Now walk to the next place that you're supposed to go to. Another guy comes in here. We don't have combat right now, but let's simulate combat and say, high roll wins. Okay, you won. And then now what do? Do you go back over to this place and we'll set stopwatches for things like, this is supposed to take about 30 seconds to make this skill check, okay? Set the stopwatch for 30 seconds. Was that about what you wanted? Does it feel too long? Of course, it's not perfect because you're not seeing the on-screen UI. It's a really easy way, and really with no programming basically required, to walk through in-game something that can happen. So it's another really, really good way to do prototyping. And then, of course, there's restricting yourself, and this falls more under the creative prototyping side. When you're prototyping for creative ideas, it often can help to just start with a limited set of concepts that you want to address. So, for example, I'll show you what I was going to do, but I'm not going to do. But this is what I was going to do. Just set yourself some restrictions. I'm going to make a prototype, and it's going to have 3 sizes of objects. Pieces are going to be moved around with my finger, and it's themed around volcanoes. Doesn't mean anything. It literally could be any set of restrictions. But with those 3 restrictions in place, all of a sudden you start thinking about, okay, what kind of ideas can I generate out of this? I mean, are there pieces of lava that come shooting out rocks that are different size that I have to try to get them back in, or protect the town by deflecting them away, or whatever? You have all kinds of suddenly ideas that you can start thinking about, and it's just with just a very few restrictions. And you can almost roll a random list of crap. I guarantee you the guy who made Angry Birds wasn't thinking to himself, birds, pigs, a slingshot, this is going to be great. Like, it doesn't have a real world simulation version, and I imagine it came out of something equally ridiculous like this. I don't actually know, but so those kinds of restrictions are the kind of thing that can really help you if you're doing creative brainstorming and prototyping at the same time. What I was going to have you guys do, and I'm not going to, but by way of understanding how important it is to go really fast, given those 3 parameters, I was going to tell you guys 5 minutes to talk about the ideas with whoever you want to talk about, friends. Then you'll work on this for 30 minutes, literally. Pieces of paper. Oh, I drew a volcano. Here's a bunch of pieces of paper I tore up to be my lava rocks that are flying out of there, or whatever you decide to do, and do it. Then come back and do a 1-minute pitch, and then this falls into the stealing category, which is, we all talk about it. Let's say which one we like best, and let's start there. We all take that same idea again, because that's the one we liked best, and then we all try to change it and make it better. And that's a really good method for improving what you're doing through prototyping. A lot of times people do a single prototype of the thing that they think they want to make, and then they don't really iterate as much as they need to, and they don't get as much feedback. And a lot of times that iteration comes in letting go of it. Like, give it to someone else and let it be theirs, because you're too attached to your ideas, and so you don't want to change them, and you don't want to iterate on them. I think that's probably all the slides I have. No, yeah, this was just the other stuff I was talking about, and that's it. So yeah, like I said, I had 2 days notice, and I was here doing other stuff. So I wouldn't call that the greatest presentation ever, but if you guys want to ask some questions, go ahead. I'll tell you what I know, or you could share information among yourselves too. Anybody have any questions? It was that good. I'm super impressed. Anybody here doing prototypes? Go ahead.
How many prototypes have you made? for prototype?
Oh gosh, dozens. Oh, how many prototypes have we made for World of Darkness was the question, and dozens. The biggest thing that we use in prototyping are our in-game engine tools, though, where we just block out an environment with squares, so we don't have to do modeling time. Animation-wise, sometimes we'll just drop a model in that has no animation in it, but simply can move around with T-pose. Yeah, we've done dozens, and then you know, we've used some scripting stuff to make okay prototypes as well, where you can actually build in gameplay for a lot of the things that you're talking about, but those tend to take more time. But we've done a recent play test for this takeover thing that I was talking about, that we probably iterated on it. Well, we ran a play test every day. So the team that was doing the scripting would run the play test. They would gather feedback immediately after the play test, go back to their desks, change it that day, and the next day run another play test. And they did that every day for probably 2 weeks in a row, just gathering feedback and presenting it, videotaping it, and then going back through and analyzing the videotape and what people thought. So, a lot. Not as much as we should, though, to be fair. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we've made the mistake of just jumping in too soon on and starting to design and starting to try to implement a design that was never really tested or vetted, and then finding out, ooh, this kind of sucks now that it's in game, and taking it back out. So, yeah, absolutely. We have a story system. Another thing that is, just to kind of give you a little insight from on the World of Darkness side, we often make a mistake of going back and trying to redo something from scratch instead of just taking what we have and making it better. And that's what this prototype thing is the same as doing, except you're not doing it in game. And we frequently, because it's so hard to do stuff in the actual game itself, once you're that far into producing something in a complex engine, it's so hard to make changes that it's often people feel, let's go back and just redo it. Let's just tear everything out, knowing what we know now, and redo it. It's still the wrong approach, but it seems easier sometimes. Whereas with prototyping, you do that when it's easy, and then you just implement a more finished design, and you don't feel so much like you have to go back and redo it later. Yeah. Are any of you guys making prototypes right now? If you are, what are you prototyping? How are you doing?
Well, we're working on our game design right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're actually just testing the components and how we want to iterate the gameplay. We have a certain piece of art ready that we had already made, a year ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just testing how we want the game objectives to be and so on, with a couple of little, just changing a bit of codes because we already have the game engine running.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a couple of codes and just to get the right feel.
Correct.
And then we pin things down how we want to make it.
How often do you make changes to it? Like how frequently?
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Do you play it? Do you have other people play it?
Yeah.
On the team?
Of course.
That's another really good thing about prototyping, is it gives you an opportunity to take something that you might think is awesome because in your head you know what you wanted out of it, and show it to other people and have them actually say, I don't know what this even is. This is terrible. And I've had that happen before too, where I'm like, this is great. How could you think this is terrible? And then you show it to 5 people and they all think it's terrible, and you're like, maybe it's terrible. But it takes a while. It takes actual convincing. On that point that you were making on World of Darkness, another prototype that we did was using GameMaker, was a combat prototype. And all we did was, it was about interface and how we wanted people to interact. And they had different options for interaction. And we took pieces of concept art that had been done that were just characters posed in different positions, either punching, kicking, throwing, all the stuff that would be involved in combat. And we built the buttons at the bottom that would simulate it. Sometimes you don't even have to program it, you can just flowchart it. So you're just taking one path through it rather than trying to make it dynamically react. So you can actually just say, oh, first I kick, and then the guy makes his kick animation and your health goes down by this much or whatever. And then I punch, then I want to do a grab, and then he tries to break out of the grab, whatever. And we just did that simulated with basic concept art on screen and the buttons that we wanted just interacting between the states. And that was really helpful to us, actually. So that's another one that we've done. But nobody else here? All you guys are doing games, but nobody's done any prototypes? Except
Trying.
you're trying. Howard, what do you?
It's a simple game. It's just a platformer, but there's like one concept that complicated,
This is different. Yeah.
slowing everything down. So,
Okay. Sort of like Blink or whatever was the other time-based one, Prince of Persia, something like that, where you're playing with time mechanics, or?
no, like gravity controls.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
Something like that.
that's one where I would definitely go look in the App Store. There's about 10,000 platformers in there, and I'm not saying that, but it can help you actually to see what someone else has done and say, oh, wow, I actually don't like that, but that's similar to what I was thinking of doing, or it's great, but I can do it better. So, yeah, anybody else?
Well, when you have all these examples, is it really that useful to make a prototype or to just define your idea right based on the examples you already have and to go with it and to be faster without prototyping?
It depends on what it is. So frequently, we'll view a prototype as someone else's game, and it's not technically a prototype, but it's an example. And so when we look at how we want characters to move in our game, we don't start by doing any animation. We start by bringing 30 games into the office and sitting into the group of people and saying, is that how you want people to move? Is that how you want people to move? And you know, Assassin's Creed, BioShock, what are we looking at? World of Warcraft. And we'll go through all these, we'll use controls, look at it on screen, and then finally say, this one feels most like what we want. It's not exactly what we want, but this one is our base level of operating. Or we might say, well, we want climbing like Assassin's Creed, but we want something different from the actual movement of the characters on the street. We don't want them to be so fast, or we want them to be faster. You know, and so same thing, jumping, like there's all crazy stuff that they can do in Assassin's Creed. We don't want all that because, excuse me, we're not making Assassin's Creed, and that's the fundamental like essence of what it is. So we'll say it's like Assassin's Creed, but without these other parts that would add complications for us. So yeah, but I've rarely found something that later I wish I didn't go back when I've implemented and said, I should have tested that a little bit more before we did it. So,
So we always recommend to prototype with game boards.
No. Game, like I said, you know, Game Maker is a perfect example. Something for 20 bucks that even game designers can use, and just sit down and say, hey, sit down for a couple of hours and drag some buttons on screen, make them interact with these objects. You know, it even does have a 3D component, but the problem with a lot of 3D prototyping, well, there's UDK and there's the source engine that are great for prototyping. Especially UDK, because it can be scripted. If you're a programmer and you know what you're doing and you can script UDK, you can really do a lot of crazy stuff with it. Basically simulate almost any kind of gameplay that you could want. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So you were saying you always recommend prototyping?
Board games.
Board games, oh yeah, that's right. No, not always. But we tend to use board games when something is systems involved. So we tend to use when there's action component to it, we tend to use more of a 3D prototype. When there's a strategic component, we tend to use more of a board game type of thing. So when you're thinking about how you want a player to behave over a certain amount of time, over obstacles, then that would tend to be more like a paper board game type of thing. And when you're thinking about how you want people to interact and what you want the controls on screen to be, that's when we move to more electronic means of prototyping. Is anybody here right now thinking about, maybe I'm going to go back and make something to test my game before I build it? Or are you guys just going to keep going on the path that you're going on? No?
Not sure.
Yeah. I've found often that the hard part of it is thinking of the game in a different context, or whatever you're making in a different context. Like, how would I apply this to a board game? But it oftentimes it comes out a little bit easier than you would think. It's something like a platformer. Those are really hard because that's all about interaction and timing and speed, and you can't do that in anything other than a mock-up electronically. But something like Game Maker is great for making platformers. It's phenomenal. So, yeah. Anything else? No? Okay.
What's the most used prototyping method? You said that walkthrough was very used, or what's the most used?
For us, and a walkthrough is not
No, it's not.
truly a prototype,
Okay.
but it is the thing we use most, without a doubt. So we usually do releases every 6 months internally, because you need milestones. And CCP works on Scrum, which is a very sort of team-centric let the teams make their own decisions, and that sometimes makes it very hard to, when you're letting 13 teams make their own decisions, it makes it hard to get an overview. And so we often start with that walkthrough as an overview, and we will say, in 6 months, you're going to be able to sit down in front of the computer and you're going to be able to do this. You're going to open the client, you're going to start by seeing your character selection screen, you're going to click on the character you want, you're going to be able to select the location that you want to start in. Like, we literally will make it all the way through to the end. And then that way the teams all go and will say, now this section from where you enter the game to where you finish dressing your character, that's your team's part. You need to make this all work. And then the team comes back and they'll often push back and say, well, the part you wrote in there about how you want your characters to dress or the interface, we don't like it. It's not right. And say, okay, well, what would be better? And they'll make suggestions and we'll change it and we'll update the walkthrough. Oftentimes something will happen like, because we're still, there's not a full 3D environment in terms of assets to use, we'll use the same locations over and over again. For example, just to test stuff out. And sometimes teams will come in and say, hey, we got rid of that location because, this is really not prototyping anymore, but it's about coordination for the team. And those walkthroughs really get us all in alignment at the beginning and alignment at the end. And so even though it's not technically prototyping, it has the same purpose, which is to get everybody seeing the same vision. That's the one we use most. Then I would say we use in-game prototypes. Then I would say we use board game stuff, because board game stuff tends to be, like I said, around a big system, and usually we only have, for a game like ours it's massive, we might have 10 system type systems versus, a lot of interactions, and the interactions are more what we test on in games. So, there you go. Okay. Well, thanks guys, appreciate it. Hope it was at least a little informative. Oh, go ahead.
Is there anyone that would like to show Chris their idea or what you're working on to get some actual feedback?
I'll steal it.
Yeah, I will see that. Yeah. But if you want to just stay for a while and he'll just take a look at your stuff after the.
Sure, if you want.
Yeah.
It's no problem. No, I don't mind. Well, I appreciate it, and hope you guys got at least a little something out of it. What's your next topic that you guys are doing?
We're gonna do a final workshop next. So just come here and just get any help that you like on your product. We'll probably have more than one people to come, and I'm hoping that Matt and Chris from the game design lecture, I think both of them are going to show up. I'm hoping to get also the same guys that talked to us about programming from GoGotGig. But I'm not sure, we're just gonna try to get as many people from the industry as we can to give you guys feedback and help you put a final touch on your product.